Welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we are up to chapter 16. Let's get into it. Okay. Midnight deepened into the early hours of the morning, and the Shadowhawk quickened his stride, moving deeper into the narrowest and darkest alleyways of Dock City. A long, formless grey cloak swirled around his ankles, the hood pulled well down over his masked face. The quick strides and intimate knowledge of the layout of these streets usually kept him safe from the cutthroats and pickpockets who looked for far easier marks. The cloak marked him as someone who wanted to remain anonymous, and in this part of town, those who wanted to remain anonymous would usually kill for the privilege, so it paid to steer clear of them. And if it came to it, he could always draw the shadows around him and disappear. His gaze marked the 3 lines etched in white chalk on the wooden sidewall of a shoemaker's shop. The 3rd line had been drawn carefully under the first 2. Acknowledging his agreement to meet. Good. After walking 3 more blocks, then circling the area twice to make sure he wasn't being followed or watched, he stopped at a door set 3 steps down from the street. It swung open noiselessly, and he stepped into the darkness beyond. As soon as it closed around him, flint sparked and light flared from a small lamp. He glanced around, relaxing slightly at the sight of the covered windows. "It's taken you a while." Saniya's voice was edgy, but that was nothing new. "It's my 3rd request for a meet. When you rely on chalk markings in unsavory places, it can take me a while to notice them." He pushed back his hood, revealing the mask. "Why did you want to meet?" They never did this without reason. Apart from Narvis, Saniya was the only living person to speak to him face to face so frequently. When he'd been the one to seek out Narvis after carefully researching those that peddled information in Dock City, it had been Saniya who had approached him. She'd offered logistical assistance in return for access and information. The people she worked for, he'd never met any of them, could also quickly move and hide those in danger of arrest by the wing guard or patrol, and did so willingly. He suspected the group had started out as smugglers and seen him as an opportunity to expand their business. Guilt never failed to rise its ugly head at the understanding he was likely helping a criminal organization, but he couldn't deny that since Saniya had approached him, his ability to distribute stolen food and other necessary goods had increased markedly. A wall quarter patrolman found one of the storehouses where we were keeping the wheat. They cleared it out before we could move it. Anger leapt in his chest. "How did they find it?" "We don't know. You need to tell your people to be more careful. I can't have them carelessly—" "They don't carelessly do anything," he hissed. "They risk their lives each and every time they help me, and they know it. Some of them have died, and if you think they've forgotten that, even so—" She was unbothered by his anger. "They need to do better." His mouth curled. "And what is it you're so afraid of, Saniya? That your gang might be caught and rolled up by the patrol? Or better yet, the Falcons?" She snarled, reaching his side in a second, dark blue eyes cold and flat. "I'm afraid of the same thing you are, Shadowhawk. Exposure. Endanger my people, and I'll hang you out to dry. You're mistaken in the level of control you imagine I have over my network. I work alone. They help me when they can, but it's too dangerous, for them and me, to have direct contact." "Just tell them to be more careful." She stepped back. "I don't take orders from you, and neither do my people," he said evenly. "You're useful to me, but I won't put lives at risk by working with you. How am I to know that your people didn't make a mistake, or that one of them isn't taking bribes from the Falcons?" "We don't take bribes and we don't make mistakes," she said coolly. "So quit acting like you're not just as much of a criminal as I am. Like you said, our alliance works because we suit each other's purposes, but it can break quickly if you become a vulnerability we can't afford." "You say that," he murmured, voice taking on an edge, "but I've seen the look in your eyes when you talk about the winged folk or the Falcons. You're not just in this for the money." Her mouth thinned. "You know nothing about me." "I know more than you think." Like the fact he'd just hit home with his words. For the first time he began to wonder why it had been her to approach him, not another member of her group, or even the group's leader. "And I won't accept you continuing to talk to me like I'm an incompetent inferior of yours." Her jaw tightened. "I know more than you think too, Shadowhawk. Like this poor street criminal act you've mastered. No poor street criminal has the level of access to winged folk and falcon activities that you must have to stay uncaught all this time." He held her glance for a moment, not giving away anything by reacting to her words, then moved on. "My notices about the shipment of seeds have been up for over a week. If the Falcons ignore them much longer, we'll need to consider other ways of getting more." She paused at the door, voice grudging. "We could use some of those seeds." The Shadowhawk nodded. "We give the Falcons a few more days, Then we'll meet and work out how best to get the supplies we need. The closing door was the only affirmation he got. He was halfway back to his apartment when the feeling in the night air changed around him. In a single movement, he stepped off the street and pressed up against the shadows of the nearest wall. Before he had time to sweep the area with his gaze, or even begin to draw the shadows around himself, a woman screamed and came running out of the alley to his right. She was scantily dressed, hair long and tangled, a street girl. But those who worked this part of Dock City didn't scare easily. This one had terror filling her eyes and voice, so much so she didn't notice him as she ran past in a panicked sprint. Not allowing himself to stop and debate the sense of what he was doing, he edged around into the mouth of the alley. Darkness filled it, the upper stories of the buildings to either side leaning over so as to eclipse any moonlight above. A whisper of movement rasped over his senses, and he was about to back away, the smart thing to do, when he caught sight of the fallen body. Eyes up, he strode quickly towards it, kneeling down and placing 2 fingers at the person's throat. No pulse. His hand came away sticky with blood. His stomach tightened. Another whisper of movement came further down the alley. Fear curled down his spine, unfamiliar and unsettling. The darkness rarely made him afraid. Instinctively, he drew the shadows more closely around him, hiding, then took a deep breath and a step in the direction of the movement. His eyes stared into inky blackness. Beyond the thud of his heartbeat and the soft murmur of his breath, he swore he could feel another presence in the darkness. Whoever it was stood there, still, waiting. The Shadowhawk fought through the fear binding his limbs like stone and took another step forward. Another flash of movement, eyes sliding through the dark, the glint of copper, and then running footsteps. The sense of danger he'd felt was gone just as suddenly. The Shadowhawk shifted, moving so that the little light from the street beyond fell on the body. A man, middle-aged and finely dressed. The Shadowhawk's eyes narrowed, someone from the wealthy quarter enjoying an illicit night out. A murder like this wasn't entirely uncommon in the poor quarter, yet. His gaze caught on a scrap of parchment curled in the dead man's hand. He pulled it out, careful not to rip it. It was a tiny piece, the size of what you'd place in a capsule to deliver a message by bird. A single word was etched in black ink. Vengeance. Footsteps sounded in the distance, several people at least, and then snatches of the hysterical voice of the street girl who'd run screaming. She'd probably gone for the protection of the gang she worked for. He couldn't afford them seeing him and assuming he was the killer. The Shadowhawk pressed the paper back into the dead hand, then rose and moved swiftly in the opposite direction, drawing the night to him as he ran. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 16. As always, if you want to avoid any spoilers, here's the time to jump out before I jump into my author commentary. If you are leaving here, I hope you enjoyed this. Won't be much longer before chapter 17 is up. Please consider liking and subscribing on your way out. But if you don't mind spoilers and you're keen to hear some author commentary, let's jump into it. So this is the first chapter where we encounter Vengeance, the adversary that Talon and Kyon face throughout the first 3 into the 4th book of this series. And I very deliberately wanted to, in A Tale of Stars and Shadow in particular, introduce Vengeance as a very secretive, mysterious, but creepy and scary adversary. And that scene in the alley there where Kyon, as the Shadowhawk, stumbles across the Vengeance murder, and he's kind of investigating very bravely the dead body that he stumbles across, and then that moment where he can feel the murderer on the other, basically a few feet away from him in the darkness, just breathing, and to know that he's standing there, that real kind of creepy vibe I was really going for, and hopefully that landed. Kyon, being a song mage, can also pick up the emotions and the presence of that person there, which also comes through between the lines, even though the reader doesn't yet know that the Shadowhawk is Kyon. He unrolls that single word, vengeance, and there we have our enemy. And unbeknownst to the reader yet, and unbeknownst to the Shadowhawk, he's just had a meeting with Vengeance's leader, Saniya. She and he have a working relationship, a very testy one, but one that's mutually beneficial. Yep, Kyon, again, as the Shadowhawk, he's getting the sense from her that maybe this partnership is a little bit more dangerous than he thought it was, and that he might be participating in something he doesn't really want to be participating in. And this is the first inkling that he's getting of that. But he really has no choice if he wants to help. the people of Dock City if he wants the ability to distribute the wheat and the food and the other supplies that he steals that he needs. Saniya's network. So he's really kind of between a rock and a hard place there. He has no good choices. But yeah, this chapter was really setting the scene for Vengeance as the adversary that we'll be facing for some time now. It was a fun one to write. I liked writing the scary scenes. I'm glad I wasn't the Shadowhawk in that moment. I think I would have turned and run from the alley, not stayed there and tried to figure out what was happening. So kudos to the Shadowhawk. But yeah, if you have any questions on this chapter, on the Shadowhawk, or what was happening here with Vengeance, please drop them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer. Chapter 17 coming up soon, another Talon chapter. I'm really looking forward to it, so it won't be too much longer. I hope you're enjoying this so far, and as always, if you have any suggestions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Otherwise, I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.